Today's episode of Chat and Chew is sponsored by Be Positive Productions and Multimedia Studios, LLC. I like to think of imagination as something akin to a superpower. Used in the right context for good, it can help bolster our aspirations and propel us closer to our goals. We visualize the outcome of our accomplishments and work toward attaining said thing. However, when used to propagate untruths, reality can become distorted. We no longer know what's real and what's not. The more often we repeat something to ourselves, the more likely it is to become our truth, and the lines between perception and reality begin to blur. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a wrap. Please make sure you follow us on Facebook, like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, hit the bell to activate notifications that will remind you when we're on. Please be sure to leave us a comment to let us know how we're doing. We'd love to hear from you.
Welcome, James. Welcome to our this week podcast, Chat and Chew podcast.
Glenn, glad to be here, and welcome to you too.
Yes, sir.
We welcome our viewers. We're glad to see you, or you all see us. We are in the midst of another fourth quarter now.
Yes.
And with that, we would like to get as many viewers involved in watching our podcast on a weekly basis. And by doing that, you will help us because we need to get some of these messages out.
Yes.
But if you're on Facebook, we would like for you to like us.
Yes.
And then hit the follow button so that you can see when and where we're going to be or what time we're going to be on, things like that. Mm-hmm. I know our producers always send out some tidbits throughout the week and to remind individuals that we're going to be on Wednesday nights. But the other one is YouTube. Mm-hmm. So if you are a YouTube user, please subscribe.
Hit that little bell.
Hit the bell. And there's a thumb up.
Oh, okay.
Hit that one too. But the last one is going to be Instagram. So if you want to follow us on Instagram, just look for Fathers Forever. You're not going to have to do too much, but you can like us there too. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, we want our viewers to give us some comments, some feedback. We would like to either get those comments or get your name on the so that we can give a shout out. Yeah.
Welcome to our guest, Carmen Cauthen. I've known you for several years, and I've always had issues pronouncing your last name.
I used to have issues pronouncing my last name.
Oh, really? Why do you say that was?
Because I used Wimberley for the other half of my life.
Oh, that's why you're Carmen Cauthen. Anyway, I am so glad to have you interview us today. You are what people would call a historian. Yes. And I am, I've known you for several years. When I first met you, it was through our good friend, Betty Richardson, who has, when Betty introduced somebody, you got to do what you got to do. Anyway, you actually 2000, what?
2020.
You started working with us, actually as receptionist at the phone. And that was that your skill level is so much more than a receptionist. You found that out later. And then you actually became very instrumental in us in getting Father Forever University up and running. I remember sitting out telling you what I wanted to do, and you came and sit down in this very room here, and we spent many hours coming together with Father Forever University. You laid it all out, and we taped it, and it's up and running now.
It is.
And I
It's
just
an amazing time.
yes. But actually, it was in the middle of the pandemic.
It was.
The pandemic had just started, and we wanted to switch, like everybody else doing. We're coming up with different ways to do it, and we came up with Father Forever University, which is the 12 weeks class that's going to be done online.
Right.
And so, since you also have done our newsletter, so you've been part of Father Forever Family since 2020. But you got big. You kind of grew up. You kind of outgrew us. You really did. So we're going to really get into the work you've been doing for most of your life, but primarily in the last 3 or 4 years, what you have been doing. And before we get into that, though, I want to tell us a little bit about you. Who is Carmen Cauthen?
So I'm a Raleigh native.
Raleigh native.
I was born at St. Agnes Hospital on the historic St. Augustine's University campus.
Really?
Your alma mater.
Yes, absolutely.
I was born in 1959, the year that they took the last Black patients in at St. Agnes. It was a Black hospital. Right before Waiting Ed opened in 1961. I have lived all over Raleigh and in Durham.
Mm-hmm.
So I came home to historic Washington Terrace, which was the first apartment complex built for Black professionals in 1951.
Wow.
So we lived there. And then we moved a couple of places. My father was a pharmacist, and like his dad before him, and my mother was an educator. My dad bought a drugstore in Durham, in the Haytime community, from Dr. York Garrett, who had 2 drugstores in Durham. So we moved to Durham when I was, 3. Stayed there until urban renewal took out the Haytime community to build a highway. Moved back to Raleigh. He bought another drugstore here in Raleigh from Dr. Tom Hanlon. It's called Community Drugstore. It was located at the corner of Blunt and Moore Street.
Good.
So we moved back to Raleigh and have been in Raleigh ever since. My mother was one of the first teachers to desegregate the Raleigh public school system in 1968. That's when they desegregated the teachers. And then in 1971, they desegregated the students. She was at a white school in North Hills called Mary Douglas, and looked for a house to purchase close by work. And of course, in 1968, the Fair Housing Act had just passed. It was hard to find a house in a neighborhood that wasn't in Black Raleigh, in Southeast Raleigh. And what she told me then, we ended up buying a house in off of Ridge Road, which is a white neighborhood. And I didn't understand why we had moved to this white neighborhood. She said, we would have had to buy 2 lots in Southeast Raleigh to build the kind of house that we had. And that didn't make any sense to me. I was 9 then. And so I ended up growing up in a very white community in the late 60s, early 70s. Most of my friends, my Black friends, were in Southeast Raleigh. And so I always felt kind of like left out and left alone. Because at that age, you can't spend any time with your friends if they're not in the neighborhood with your parents.
Right. You have to really get there.
Right. And so my parents, my father was living in the drugstore. My mother was very active in the community. And so a lot of times I was just home. And I would read a lot. And one of the things that they also taught me was the importance of family, the importance of history, and the importance of what Black people did. I didn't learn these things at school, but I learned it at home. But I always loved history. So even in the library at the school where I was, they had a series of autobiographies or biographies of white people. I read every one of them. And I've always wanted to know who did what.
Right.
And I want to tell other people because it's just exciting to me to know what we did. And my mother's family is from Wayne County, from the town of Mount Olive. And I knew that our family was the reason that Mount Olive existed. So the railroad was going through that area. The town was not built. They sued my 4 times great grandfather twice to get the land to make the town of Mount Olive to put the railroad.
Wow.
And our family, that side of the family, had never been enslaved. And had, they always said they were Indian, had Indian in the background. But family history and family lore was always important. And they always emphasized, you got to know the family history. They would write it down, they would research it. So all of this was in my background, but I never thought about being a historian.
So that explains why, ever since I've known you, you've been very, when you take on a project, you're always doing the powerful research. I want to come in, you don't have to do that much research, but you're digging in and making sure, and so that explains, your history, explains it. So if you didn't get paid, what is your why? What makes you get up every morning and do the thing that you do? We're gonna talk about that. But what makes you get up every morning?
I don't like to get up at night.
Well,
I like to stay up at night and work all night long.
4 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm getting a email from Carmen saying, this is the latest newsletter. It's at 3 o'clock. I don't mean slept for 5 hours now. You still working. But I can't get up with you until after 12. So you sleep.
So my why is to make sure, number one, that my people know their history and that they understand. My hashtag is my history, our history, because it's important for us to all know that every family in America, it doesn't matter their color, it doesn't matter their status, we all have part of the history of America. And so the truth has to be told. And what has recently really come to me is that the history of America was written by, number one, people who could read and write.
Right.
They were white. They were people who owned land, which means they were white men. And if they owned land, they had money. They had other people who would work for them, whether it was people who were enslaved or paid. And our history has been written from the point of view of people who owned the land. So they wrote journals about what they did every day, who they sold or what they bought. So our history was written from that point of view. Indians weren't, they were put on the reservations at some point, but they weren't really reading and writing. Black people were an oral storytelling kind of group. And in Africa, that was something that was revered, to carry the story and to train the next generation to know the history of what came before. And we didn't have that. And it's important that we write things down. So when I'm digging into history, I'm hoarding information because I want to make sure that I don't lose it. And I want to make sure that if I need to go back and find it, it's somewhere that I can put my hands on it. And then I want to disseminate it to everybody. And so when I wrote this book, it wasn't what I intended to do. I really wanted to write a book about my mother because women, Black women in particular, they didn't get their due in the 60s and 70s or before that or, since then. And she was such a role model. She was not just an educator, but she was a community activist with the community at heart. And so I even though, how you bump heads with your parents, my mom taught me how to do so many things. And I wanted to honor her with that. But I also worried about affordable housing. And so I was asked to teach some history about Raleigh's affordable housing.
I bet you your favorite subject in class was history.
I like history and I like English. Yeah, I did.
You do which stuff you go,
Yeah.
So also, how important do you think it is for people to study their family history
Oh, it's
and go back and find out what my grandfather did and my great grandfather and my great grandfather? How important is that? And why is it that? And people are not spending lots of money to find out their lineage.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this generation, our generation, next generation, sometimes they don't seem to be that important. They're not necessarily looking for it.
You know, I think the importance is it gives me encouragement to know that somebody behind me or before me did something to make it possible for me to do what I'm doing, even if I don't see the value of it. And I think part of it is I need the encouragement. You know, we hear too many stories of kids who are going to school and they're getting told, you ain't nothing.
Right.
You ain't gonna never be nothing.
Right.
Your people weren't. And that's a lie. Yeah. It's not true. And I think when we teach our youth who they came from and what they did, even if your family member, your great grandfather, dug ditches to help put the streets down in the city of Raleigh, that had to be done. Somebody had to do it.
Right.
And they took pride in what they did. It wasn't, it wasn't, oh, woe is me. I got to do this, so I'm just going to do a sorry job. That's not true. And they were the excellence, the consideration of I'm doing the best I can. I am giving this to God as I do it was oh so important during those times. And today I was at the Olivia Rainey Library doing some research and reading the report of the mayor each year. I guess I was looking from 1892 to 1902. And I was reading this book with this report, and it talked about the excellence, how Raleigh was seen. It was a lot like reading about today, how Raleigh was seen as such an excellent place to be, an excellent place to live. The streets were pretty. How much curbing was built, what kind of pipes were put down, for plumbing. The report of the hospital, of the sanitary board, and the doctors who were over the hospitals, and the report of, this is really neat, was to read a report of who was over the age of 70 during that period. And they would list their names and whether they were white or colored and how old they were, what year they were born in. And I'm thinking, some of these people, their family doesn't know that their name is in this document, or how much it costs to go to the hospital, or the fact that there was a tuberculosis crisis in 1908 and a smallpox crisis in 1899 that predominantly killed people in third and fourth wards, which we know, or I know, and let me share, third and fourth wards were Southeast Raleigh, because that's where Black people had to live. You couldn't live in first or second ward because you weren't allowed to. And so the other piece for me is learning how Southeast Raleigh became all Black.
Right. And a lot of times because we don't know that history, I was sitting with a good friend of mine a couple days ago, and he was talking about slavery and all that stuff we went through. And he said one of his nephews said, I wish you could go back to that era. And he's like, boy, don't you ever open your mouth to say anything, because you have no idea what that is about. And because sometimes we don't teach that history. They don't get the impact of how we came, of what we came from. And we're going to get into the book, but this is fascinating to me when you look at family history. And when you find out my daddy was, help, whatever he did, he helped, invent something. He was this great movie star. He was this great athlete, or whatever he was. And we don't see that. in the history book. And it's not told to us unless our grandma, and sometimes our grandma or great grandma who's still living tells those stories, and we haven't written those stories down. So we don't have a clue what about history.
Yeah. When my parents and my grandparents would tell those stories, I didn't, when I was a kid, I didn't care. I just wanted to play.
Right, exactly. We don't because we don't.
And so when we talk about slavery, one of the things that opened my eyes, the WPA Works in Progress Administration during Franklin Delano Roosevelt's tenure as president, that was a way that people were paid. White people got paid to go and interview people who had been slaves all across the country. So there are 2 volumes for North Carolina of the WPA slave narrative. And you can go back and you can read these interviews that formerly enslaved people gave to white people. And some, you might take some of it with a grain of salt because here's somebody white coming in and talking to this person. But the information that they did tell is important.
Right.
And some people who had been enslaved, it was not, they didn't consider it to be as hard as being on their own. When you consider that when slavery ended, literally, it just ended. So you didn't get any money, you didn't get any new clothes, you didn't get, if you got rations, it was some salted meat and crackers, hardtack crackers is what they call them, from the Freedmen's Bureau. And if you didn't have some way to farm or grow a garden, you didn't have any food. And so one of the gentlemen that I read about, or that I read his interview, came from New Bern with what was on his back, which literally was pants. It took him 4 days to walk to Raleigh. No shoes, no shirt. He slept in barns that he could find or in haystacks to get here. And then once he got here, what did he do? You had the training that you had or the jobs that you knew from the plantation to the Mexico. But if you didn't know how did you know where to go? So it is just an awesome thing to me to see what people were able to accomplish after that with little to no help, because the Freedmen's Bureau only lasted for 3 years and it shut down. And they not only helped the formerly enslaved people, but because in the South, during the Civil War, people's money, their food, their children, and their slaves went to the war. And when I was digging last night, I was reading something that said 3 months before the war ended, the North was about to leave. And President Lincoln finally agreed to allow people who had been enslaved, who had escaped slavery, to join and fight. And they ended up with 200,000 more soldiers. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, the North wouldn't have lost it. And I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's so many things that we don't know, not against as a people, but that we don't know. Yeah. You can tell me stuff right now that I don't know. So, which is, let's get to one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you today. So tell us about, I know you're a historian. Tell us about the work you're doing now and how it is very necessary in the day we live.
So one of the things, this is the book. This is the book that I wrote. And I didn't intend to write this book. Like I said, I've been an affordable housing advocate for years. And I had found 2 white men's master's theses that talked about how politics and segregation occurred in the city of Raleigh. And the book is The Historical Black Neighborhoods of Raleigh. But what I did was to take that information and to go and talk about what affordable housing looked like. how it looked coming out of slavery, how we had at the end of slavery when people flooded the Raleigh, because by the 1890s, Raleigh was half black and half white. But between 1865 and 1899, we had, in fact, between 1865 or 1858, actually, when the Oberlin community started, and I would say 1877, we had 13 freedmen's villages set up around the outskirts of Raleigh. So Oberlin started first in 1858. It was a free people village. It was started by a man named Jesse Pettiford, who worked for the Cameron family, which was the largest slave plantation, Stagville, but it stretched from Durham to where we know of as Morrison House today. That family owned 30,000 acres of land and 900 slaves at the time slavery ended, but they think probably had over 2,000 through the years.
Wow.
And so we, Raleigh calls Mordecai House. We don't call it Mordecai Plantation. So most people don't know that that was part of that plantation. So Oberlin started that way. We had Masonville, which became Nestle. And then we had Lincolnville, which was situated right in between the Carter Finley Stadium and the PNC Arena.
Mm-hmm.
Their cemetery, their church cemetery, is still located there. They were forced to sell their land by the state of North Carolina. It was going from a prison, and eventually the land was given to NC State. Lincolnville is now, they moved 2 more times, but now they're located off the Highway 54. And there was also a community called Brooklyn, which is in downtown Raleigh, off of Glenwood Avenue now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a white community. But it was considered kind of close to St. Anne.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of folks who taught at St. Anne lived in that community. But then we had 9 other communities around the outside of Raleigh. So if you are ever driving in Raleigh on North, South, East, or West Street, those were the original boundaries of the city of Raleigh. And most of us don't know that because that's a tiny little area. The city of Raleigh was platted so that the Capitol sat in the middle and 1 mile radius out from the Capitol was where the original boundaries of the city were. So if you're at the corner of Hargett and East Street, which is where the city cemetery is, that was the edge of town. And Southeast Raleigh grew up around it. So there is a community called Hungry Neck that comes up Eatonton Street towards East Street. There's actually a house there that a lady who is 91 years old lives in. And her grandfather, I believe, Amos Brooks and his wife bought that house, bought the land and built that house, paid $7 a month for that house. She is still living in that house today. She's 91, and one of the things, he not only willed the house to his family, it willed stuff like the bed, the dining room table that she still sits at each afternoon. That was one community. Idlewild and Cotton Place. Newland Avenue split the Idlewild plantation in half.
Really?
And so the plantation house sat over where people would see Explorer School or the Brown Realty Company. That land right in there was where the Idlewild plantation house was. And then over going towards Oakwood Avenue, that was the rest of the plantation. That became another black community. Where the old D&D building is, it was Camp Russell on Newbern Avenue. So the corner of Newbern and Tarboro.
Yeah.
It was originally the Camp Russell. It was the hospital for Confederate soldiers, but it became part of the Freedmen's Bureau. And so that area became part of the Freedmen's Villages. And right behind it, where Martin Street Baptist Church's parking lot is in the back, that was an area called Old Fairgrounds. And that was where the original fairgrounds was. And so the fairgrounds today is in its 3rd iteration because the Rose Garden was where the second fairgrounds was. There's a community called Wilmington Blunt. That was the most prestigious community because that was where all the white folks lived. Memorial Auditorium was actually the original governor's house. And then when the governor moved out of there because of the Civil War, it became Centennial School, which was school for white children. But Dr. Manassas Pope, as we know, his house is in that area. Shaw University was in that area. Shaw University was actually built on a plantation. Henry Martin Tucker bought the Daniel Monroe Barringer plantation from Daniel Monroe Barringer, who was an attorney and a congressman. And that's where Shaw University sits today. St. Augustine's was not a plantation, but it was a summer home of one of the legislators who lived in further east. But this was his summer home, Willie Jones. They bought that land from him. And the other communities there, they were part of the Hayti community. Well, they were part of Fourth Ward, or what was called South Side of New York. So there was Hayti, Manly's Homestead, which was land owned by former Governor Manley, and Cannon Land, and all of that surrounded the railroad. And there was a community called Smith Haywood, and St. Petersburg, which just became.
So how do you tie all that into?
I just talk about the neighborhoods because it's important to know.
Yes.
It's just important to know that we didn't all end up over there.
Yes.
But that's where we started,
right.
And the laws would not allow us to move out. White people could live over there, right. And then when they started to make more money, they could move.
Right.
And so that's why Southeast Raleigh is predominantly black, or has been.
And has been. Right. Yeah. So how is that changing? How is that changing now?
It's changing because we're not building any more land. White people are moving here. Well, people are moving to Raleigh in Wake County, like 70,000 people a year. And so this land that nobody wanted to live in, nobody wanted to improve for years, is the only land that's available and, what people consider an affordable cost. And so they're buying land. They're buying that land up. But those are narrow plots of land because that's the way they were created when the white people bought them to stick little houses on the rent to the formerly enslaved people. So when I asked my mama why we moved to the white neighborhood,
well, she said
we had about 2 lots. That's why. And so when we see houses today going up in Southeast Raleigh, they're going up because you can't spread them out. Remember, some of those houses didn't have a table width of space in between the 2 houses.
Man.
So it's just fascinating
to
know this is where we came from. This is how we grew. This is how we built. We built Raleigh.
So what do you see this at in 20 years?
In 20 years, there'll be a series of books. I'm working on another book now.
No, the books. I'm talking about the neighborhoods.
The neighborhoods, I'm really afraid that there'll be white neighborhoods and black people will be obliterated. Because I lived in Oberlin. I sold my house in Oberlin, and I can't afford to buy anything else. And I'm seeing people moving out into neighboring counties because that's where you can afford to buy some land. That's where you can afford to buy a house. I've been looking, last weekend I started looking at houses, just doing the Parade of Homes thing for something fun to do because we've been doing that for 50 years. But houses are selling in Oakland, houses are selling for $500,000 and up. And they're, how many black people live here or are moving here and can afford that? So it's sad because we're being pushed out of the places where we were told we had to be, and now here we go. And it's causing other social issues. For people who are homeless, people who have lost their homes, or for people who you work with who need an affordable place to live. Their rents are $1,500 and up for a studio, and so that's why our newest apartment complexes have literally become the hotels on the edge. People can afford to pay. by the day, and they can't afford to put together 3 months' rent, which is almost $5,000, to be able to put one on the apartment.
Wow, that is unfortunate. So let's get. This is yeah. So when you look at this book here, and when you talk about the whole history of Raleigh, what is the next step that you do? I noticed you have another book which is like the
It's an activity book for I would say 4th grade to adults. So it's got more history.
Yeah.
It's not in the original book. It's coloring pages. It's word searches. But you're still learning more stuff because there's no way to put all of it in one book that wouldn't be so heavy you wouldn't be able to.
Right. It'd be so heavy that people would be intimidated by it and they wouldn't read it because it's so massive.
Right.
They would just like, oh, I can't read it.
Yeah.
And so, like,
I'll be doing an activity book every 2 months.
Okay.
And I'm getting ready to start work on the next book. It won't be a sequel. The company that I work with does not do sequels, but we're hoping. Well, I know we're going to do a book on like Voices of Mount Hope Cemetery. Because we want to go back and tell the stories of some of the people who were in the WPA slave narrative. The gentleman that I'm collaborating with has done research taking those WPA slave narratives, going back, finding out where the plantations were, and then bringing the family history as far forward as possible, and then taking it to those. If he can find a family member, he takes it to them and shares it to uplift their family. So I didn't want to just write about important people, we consider this family is important, but every family is important. So I was determined that there would need to be a way for me to tell stories about the regular, everyday people like us, just regular folks. So
this, I think, is going to be these workbooks or these handbooks, activity books. It's going to be very instrumental in teaching history to our kids, actually adults.
Yeah, I've got lots of adults who like to color, so
yes,
and the pictures that are in them are original pictures that have been taken with the camera, and I have had someone to draw them. I tried tracing them, but my daughter told me to throw the tracing out.
They wasn't right.
So we are, but I love the fact that you'll have these historical pictures in your hand, and you can, kids can make them look like them.
Right, so this lady named
Lucille Hunter. So we have an elementary school in Raleigh that was named after her. She actually never taught there. Her husband was a principal there. She taught at Washington School. But her students, when they built the school, her students requested that the school be named after her. In North Carolina. And she and her husband had one child who died at the age of 15. She's buried at Mount Hope Cemetery. And she was an amazing woman. She lived till her late 80s. This picture that we've come to here is Gaston Alonzo Edwards, and a lot of people don't understand. He was the first licensed architect in the state of North Carolina, first Black licensed architect in the state of North Carolina. So it's not that we haven't been doing these things. People just don't know. We have been doing what everybody else has been doing, and what people just don't know about. So he designed some of the buildings that Shaw University.
Wow. Yeah, this is these are, again, the teachers, you can't see it, but just reading a paragraph and a half about Mr. Dr.
Love Cape.
Yeah.
So for those of you who are in Raleigh, you know that Lightner's funeral home burned a couple of months ago. That was his house. He sold that house to the Lightner family for their funeral home. But Dr. Capehart graduated from Shaw University Medical School. He also graduated from Shaw and was an educator first. He went to Mississippi and taught and came back and went to medical school after he had finished doing that. And then became a physician in practice.
I know we have to go, but two more people, Mr. Charles Irvin and Miss Vivian Irvin.
Charles and Vivian Irving were a father and daughter who started a printing press here in Raleigh. And they actually donated the inside, all of their stuff from the printing press, which ran over 50 years, to UNC. So all of that information has been encapsulated at UNC. You can go to the library and see it. Miss Irving, Vivian, was a community activist. Her father was. When he moved here, he was a postal. He worked in the postal service. His dream was to own the printing press, but he fought the postal service for because they had segregated lunchrooms and segregated bathrooms. And he said, you know, if we're going to work here, we ought to be able to use the same facilities that everybody else does. And Miss Irving worked in Washington, D.C., and then came back here. She started a club. She loved to travel, and she would take young people to travel around different parts of the country.
Well, I said was the last one, Mr. Joseph Winters.
Joseph Winters was the first.
He's not the John Winters.
No, they're related, but they're not the same.
Okay.
So Joseph Winters was the first black police officer after Reconstruction ended, because we did have folks who were very involved in city commissioners and police officers after slavery ended up until 1900. Jim Crow came back into effect. But Joseph Winters not only was a police officer, he started an entertainment company. So he brought people like Aretha Franklin and Jackson 5 and those kind of bands to Raleigh to play. So that's how we had a strong entertainment system here as well. I remember going to see Jackson 5 in a set of hot pants when I was probably in middle school back in the 60s. So,
wow.
Yeah.
This is amazing. You are certainly a historian. I've learned so much stuff. I'm going to get these books. We live in a day and time where people are trying to take history out and that. Instead of, I'm so glad that you're doing what you're doing. I wish we can have more people do what you're doing. I want to encourage you to continue to write these things monthly if you can. I mean, people can really learn a lot. It's myself. I want to take these things in, because there's a lot of history that we don't know, that we walk around every day educated and helping people out, but we still don't know.
It's so important.
The history of
it makes a difference in how you feel about yourself when you know that people did something, your people did something, and it wasn't just other folks. It's so important. If anybody's interested in the book, you can get Historical Black Neighborhoods of Raleigh if you're in this area, you can get it at Barnes & Noble. The Barnes & Noble stores carry it. It's at Quail Ridge Books. It's online, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart, all of the online places.
Right.
The workbook.
Activity book.
I'm going to give you my email. It's admin, ADMIN, at research, RESEARCHAND, resource, RESOURCE.com. If you email me, I will send you the link to get on my email list and to get that book.
Well, Carmen, I am so happy that I got to interview you. I knew back in the day when we were working for us, I said you grew. It's a much bigger father there. So I'm glad you left us to do this. Okay. I would have been angry if you left any other way. But I'm glad they let you go to do this work, because this is, in my opinion, just as important as any other work in our day and time, to learn the history, not only as Black, but as Black, but as people in general. And for the neighborhoods of Raleigh that we live in. I mean, I'm all over Raleigh. Now I can say, I know where that originated from. I know how that got started. Wow, this is, I used to go down Outwood all the time. I had no idea the significance of what that was. Cameron Village, I heard you talk about Cameron Village. But I never knew how it was placed in the community and what it used to be and what it is now. So these are the things that make home feel more holy.
Yes.
It makes us feel more connected.
Yes.
Because we are connected. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you as well.
Here's 3 ways you can support our Dads at a Distance initiative. Give a copy to a family member, our friend. Donate monthly, a book monthly, 5 books monthly, how many books you want to do monthly donation. Reverse book signing, your church, your business. You can make a donation go to our website at www.afatherforever.com and go to our PayPal at Fathers Forever. Our Cash App is $Fathers Forever. Make your donation today. Please include in the note section, include DAAD. Again, include in the note section DAAD.
If you or someone you know would like to be a part of the show, please visit our website at www.afatherforever.com or call us at 919-779-9905. The Chat and Chew podcast streams Thursdays at 8 p.m. on YouTube and Facebook. To schedule a reverse book signing or to find out more information about how you can become a part of the programs you've heard us mention today, please be sure to stop by our website as well.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fathers Forever University. My name is Glenn Warren, and I will be your instructor. Fathers Forever University is a remote learning experience where we take our 12-week class, and we meet here every Thursday night from 6 until 7, and we talk about fatherhood. We talk about domestic violence. We talk about where your child support money is going. We teach classes about fatherhood and how important it is to be in your child's life. So these 12 weeks is going to be very important for you guys to understand and the concept of fatherhood and what we're trying to teach you. Fathers Forever University is broken down into 12 weeks, and you can start at any time during those 12 weeks. The key to it is finishing those 12 weeks. Every lesson is in lecture format, where you listen to that lecture, and then on Thursday nights, we discuss that lecture. The Thursday night discussion is where your homework will be due. Part of your homework assignment every Thursday night is to one, we'll ask you the question, what did you learn? And the second question, how am I going to apply what I learned? We also have specific assignments for each lesson in the notes below. This has been an introduction to Fathers Forever University. Now let's get started in lesson 1.